The crystal wine glass chimed sharply against the silver fork, cutting through the low hum of conversation in the dining room. It was the sound of authority, or at least the performance of it. My mother, Linda, stood at the head of the table, her face flushed with the kind of pride that usually came with a price tag attached, one that I usually paid. Everyone, please, Mom announced, beaming as she placed a hand on my younger sister's shoulder. Jessica sat there, preening, soaking up the attention like a sponge that never got full. I just want to make a toast to my baby, Jessica, and her wonderful fiancé, Kevin. The wedding planning is almost done, and let me tell you, it is going to be the event of the decade, a fairy tale for a princess. A chorus of oohs and ahs went around the table. My aunts, uncles, and cousins raised their glasses. I raised mine too, though the expensive Cabernet tasted like vinegar in my mouth. Not because I was jealous, God no, but because I knew exactly who was funding this fairy tale. I looked around the room. This house, a sprawling colonial in a wealthy Connecticut suburb, was perfectly decorated for Thanksgiving. The cornucopia centerpiece, the linen napkins, the smell of roasting turkey and sage stuffing, it screamed generational wealth. But I knew the truth. The walls were mortgaged to the hilt, and the wealth was a facade held up by my salary as a CFO in Seattle. It's going to cost a fortune, my father, Robert, chuckled, slicing into the turkey with a bit too much force. But nothing is too good for our Jess. Exactly, Mom said, her eyes finally flickering toward me. The warmth in them vanished instantly, replaced by that familiar, patronizing pity. It's just such a shame not both my daughters could find this kind of happiness. Maybe one day, Anna, you'll find someone who can tolerate your intensity. The table went quiet. It was a subtle dig, disguised as motherly concern. That was Linda's specialty. I'm happy for Jessica, I said, my voice steady. I had practiced this. I had been practicing this for 34 years. The wedding sounds lovely. Lovely. It's going to be magnificent, Jessica corrected me, flipping her blonde hair over her shoulder. She flashed a ring that probably cost more than my first car. We're flying in orchids from Thailand, and Kevin's family is inviting half of Wall Street. It's about connections, Anna. Not that you'd understand that, sitting in your little office crunching numbers all day. I gripped my napkin under the table. Crunching numbers. That's what they thought I did. They didn't know I managed multi-million-dollar portfolios. They didn't know I had just closed a deal that would secure my retirement before I was 40. To them, I was just the bank, the ATM that didn't require a PIN code. Actually, Kevin chimed in, his smile slick and predatory, we were hoping to talk to you about the honeymoon fund later, Anna, since you're saving so much money being single and all. My stomach turned. The audacity wasn't surprising. It was just exhausting. I looked at my father, hoping for some defense, some acknowledgement of the check I sent last week to cover his unexpected medical bills. He just busied himself with the gravy boat, avoiding my gaze. I felt a vibration in my pocket. It was a text from Michael. Thinking of you. Breathe. You're holding all the cards. I took a deep breath. Michael was right. They thought I was trapped in this room with them, a prisoner of their expectations and their ridicule. They didn't know I had the key to the cell in my pocket. Actually, I had the deed to the entire prison. So, Anna, Mom continued, clearly not done twisting the knife. She took a sip of wine, her eyes locking onto mine over the rim of the glass. Jessica's wedding was practically perfect in the planning stages alone. It's going to be the highlight of our lives. When are you going to give us something to celebrate? Or are you just going to focus on your career until your ovaries dry up? A nervous titter ran through the guests. My Aunt Sarah, the only person at the table who ever really looked at me, frowned and opened her mouth to speak, but I silenced her with a subtle shake of my head. Not yet. "Mom," I said, my voice calm, contrasting sharply with the storm brewing in my chest. "Let's focus on Jessica today. It's Thanksgiving." "I'm just saying," Mom shrugged, piling stuffing onto her plate. "It's hard for a mother. One daughter is a glowing bride-to-be, living her best life. The other is, well, you're very responsible, Anna. We appreciate that. Someone has to pay the bills, I suppose." "Someone has to pay the bills," I repeated internally. That was my epitaph in this family. Here lies Anna. She paid the bills. I looked at the turkey carcass on the platter, picked clean, stripped of everything valuable. That was me. That had been me for my entire adult life. But as I watched Jessica whisper something to Kevin, both of them glancing at my expensive handbag with greedy eyes, something shifted. The sadness that usually accompanied these holidays, the deep, aching wish that they would just love me for me, was gone. In its place was a cold, hard clarity. It was the feeling I got right before I executed a hostile takeover at work. The numbers were in, the audit was complete, and this family was operating at a massive deficit. "You know," I said, picking up my fork and meeting my mother's gaze with a terrifyingly pleasant smile, "you're right, Mom. Jessica's wedding sounds expensive. $100,000, you said?" "At least," Jessica bragged. "Wow," I said dryly. "That's a lot of money for people who don't have jobs." The table went silent again. This time, it wasn't awkward. It was dangerous. To understand why that moment at the Thanksgiving table was so explosive, you have to understand the history. You have to understand that I wasn't born a cynic. I was made one, dollar by dollar, disappointment by disappointment. Growing up, there was always a dichotomy in our house. Jessica was the art. I was the frame. Jessica was the destination. I was the road that got you there. Necessary, trodden upon, and largely ignored unless there was a pothole. I remember being 16. I had just gotten my first job at a local diner, working weekends and nights after school. I was saving for a car, a beat-up Honda Civic I had my eye on. I wanted freedom. I wanted to be able to drive myself to the library without begging Mom for a ride she would inevitably complain about. One afternoon, I came home, exhausted, smelling like grease and maple syrup, clutching my pay envelope. It was cash tips mostly. I went to my shoebox hidden in the back of my closet, ready to add my $60 to the stash. The box was empty. My heart hammered against my ribs. I thought I had been robbed. I ran downstairs, panic rising in my throat. "Mom! Dad! Someone broke into my room!" Mom was in the kitchen, unboxing a new espresso machine. It was shiny, chrome, and totally unnecessary. Jessica was sitting at the counter, swinging her legs, playing with a new iPod. "Calm down, Anna," Mom said, not even looking up from the manual. "Nobody broke in. I borrowed it." "Borrowed it?" I gasped. "Mom, that was $400. That was 6 months of work. I need that for my car." "Don't be selfish," she snapped, finally turning to glare at me. "Your sister needed braces. And this espresso machine? Well, your father has been so stressed lately, he deserves good coffee. We're a family, Anna. We pitch in. Besides, you're smart. You'll make more." You'll make more. That became the mantra of my life. I didn't get the car. I took the bus for 2 more years. Jessica, however, got a brand new convertible for her 16th birthday. Dad said it was because she needed a safe vehicle and she wasn't street smart like me. The pattern solidified as we got older. I got a full scholarship to college because I knew my parents hadn't saved a dime for me. Jessica barely graduated high school, yet they took out a second mortgage to send her to a private arts college where she majored in social dynamics, which mostly meant rushing a sorority and failing 3 semesters. When I landed my first big job at a top accounting firm, I thought things would change. I thought if I could prove my worth, prove I was successful, they would finally look at me with the same adoration they gave Jessica. I was wrong. Success didn't bring love. It brought invoices. Anna, the roof is leaking, and your father's bonus didn't come through. Can you help us? Just this once. Anna, Jessica got into a little trouble with a credit card. It's affecting her credit score, and she's so young. Can you fix it? You're the finance wizard. I paid. I always paid. I paid off Jessica's credit cards 3 times. I paid for the new roof. I paid for the vacations they took to reconnect while I stayed behind working 80-hour weeks during tax season. I convinced myself that this was how I bought my place at the table. If I stopped paying, would I cease to exist to them? The worst memory, the one that still wakes me up at night, happened 3 years ago. I had been saving for a down payment on a condo in Seattle. It was my dream, a place with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Sound. I had just enough. Then came the call. Dad. He sounded frantic. It's Mom. She's sick. The insurance won't cover the specialist. We need $40,000, Anna. Please, it's her heart. I didn't hesitate. I drained the account. I wired the money that afternoon. I cried as I watched my dream condo go to another buyer, but I told myself, it's Mom. Money is just money. 2 weeks later, I came home for a visit to check on her. I expected to find her frail, recovering. Instead, I found the driveway being repaved with cobblestones. I found Mom looking healthier than ever, directing the workmen. And in the garage, a restored vintage Mustang for Dad. Oh, the specialist said it was just stress, Mom chirped when I asked. We didn't need the surgery after all. But since the money was already there, we decided to invest in the property value. And your father has wanted this car since he was 20. Seeing him happy is good for my heart, Anna. You saved me in a different way. I stood there in the driveway, the smell of fresh asphalt burning my nose. They hadn't offered to return the money. They had spent my down payment on toys. That was the first crack in the foundation. I didn't stop paying then. Conditioning is a hard thing to break, but I started keeping records. I started saving receipts. The finance wizard in me woke up and realized this wasn't a family. This was a parasite and a host, and the host was getting tired. Moving to Seattle was my escape. Even though I had drained my savings for them, my salary was climbing fast. I rebuilt. I found a small apartment, not the dream condo, but it was mine. I threw myself into my work as a CFO for a boutique real estate development firm. That's where I met Michael. He was the opposing counsel on a messy zoning negotiation. I expected a shark. Instead, I found a man who listened more than he spoke, who wore suits that were expensive but understated, and who looked at me with an intensity that made me forget about spreadsheets. Our first date was at a hole-in-the-wall ramen shop, not the 5-star restaurants my family expected me to take them to. We talked for 4 hours. I told him about my job, my love for data, my obsession with vintage sci-fi novels. I didn't tell him about my family. Not at first. I wanted to be just Anna, not Anna the ATM. Michael was different. He came from money, old money, the kind that whispers rather than shouts. But he drove a 5-year-old Volvo and volunteered at a legal aid clinic on weekends. He never asked me for a dime. In fact, he was the first person in my life who tried to take care of me. "You look tired, Anna," he said one rainy Tuesday, showing up at my office with takeout and a heated blanket. "Stop working. Let me drive you home." It terrified me. To be cared for felt alien, almost suspicious. But slowly, my walls came down. When I finally told him about the $40,000 heart surgery incident, he didn't tell me I was stupid. He held me while I cried, his anger radiating off him like heat. "They don't deserve you," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "But you know that, right?" "I know," I whispered, "but they're family." "Family doesn't eat their young," he replied. 18 months later, Michael proposed. It wasn't a spectacle. We were hiking in the Cascades, overlooking a misty valley. He pulled out a ring, a vintage sapphire that had belonged to his grandmother. "I want to build a life with you," he said. "A real life. No debts, no games, just us." I said yes. We decided on a small wedding, just close friends and family, an intimate ceremony at a vineyard in Woodinville. Then came the issue of the invitations. I was torn. Part of me wanted to elope, to spare myself the drama. But the little girl inside me, the one who just wanted her mom to be proud, won out. I wanted them there. I wanted them to see that I was loved, that I was happy. I wanted Dad to walk me down the aisle. I spent weeks designing the invitations, thick, cream-colored cardstock with gold leaf lettering. They were beautiful. I wrote a personal note in the one for my parents and Jessica. "Mom, Dad, Jess, I know we've had our differences, but I want you there. I've found my person. Please come share this with me. I'll pay for the flights and the hotel. Just get here. Love, Anna." I didn't trust regular mail. I knew them too well. They would claim it got lost. So I went to the post office and sent a large packet containing all their invitations via Priority Mail Express, with signature confirmation required. I stood at the counter, watching the postal worker slap the tracking sticker on the envelope. "Important stuff?" he asked. "The most important," I smiled. I tracked that package like a hawk. 2 days later, my phone pinged. Delivered. Signed for by L. Miller. Mom had it. They had the invitations. I waited. I checked my phone every 5 minutes. I expected a call, a text, maybe even a scream of excitement. Anna's getting married. Day 1 passed. Silence. Day 2. Silence. Day 3. I called Mom. She didn't pick up. I called Dad. Voicemail. I called Jessica. Straight to voicemail. "Maybe they're just surprised," I told Michael, pacing our living room. "Maybe they're planning a surprise engagement party for me." Michael looked skeptical, but stayed supportive. "Maybe, honey. Give them time." I gave them time. I gave them a week, then 2, then a month. I sent follow-up emails. "Did you get the invite? Please RSVP so I can finalize the caterer." Nothing. It was as if I was shouting into a void. But I knew they were alive. I saw Jessica posting on Instagram, photos of her brunch, her new shoes, her vibes. Not a word about me. Not a word about the wedding. The realization started to seep in like ice water. They weren't missing. They were ignoring me. They were withholding their presence as punishment, or perhaps simply because my happiness didn't serve their narrative. I stopped calling. I focused on the wedding. But a cold, hard knot formed in my stomach, and it wouldn't go away. The morning of my wedding was gray and misty, typical for the Pacific Northwest. But by noon, the sun broke through, bathing the vineyard in a golden glow. It should have been the happiest day of my life, and in many ways, it was. I wore a dress I had paid for myself, silk, simple, elegant. My hair was done up in soft waves. I looked in the mirror and saw a woman who was successful, loved, and beautiful. But when I looked at the reflection of the room behind me, the empty space where a mother usually stands to zip up the dress, the crack in my heart widened. Michael's mother, Helen, stepped in. She was everything Linda wasn't. Warm, unobtrusive, kind. "You look breathtaking, Anna," she said softly, adjusting my veil. She caught my eye in the mirror. She knew the situation. Michael had told her. I know I'm not your mother, but I would be honored to claim you as a daughter today." I choked back tears. "Thank you, Helen." The ceremony began. The music started, a string quartet playing a cover of a song Michael and I loved. I walked out onto the grass. The setup was divided into two sides. The groom's side was full. Michael's family, his law partners, our friends from Seattle. It was a sea of smiling faces. Then there was the bride's side. My friends from work were there, a few college roommates, but the front row, the row reserved for mother of the bride, father of the bride, sister of the bride, was empty. 3 white folding chairs, stark and vacant, staring back at me like missing teeth. I had hoped, up until the very last second, that a rental car would screech into the driveway, that Dad would come running up, adjusting his tie, apologizing for being late, that Mom would be there, criticizing my flowers, but there. But as I reached the altar and took Michael's hands, the driveway remained empty. I held it together. I focused on Michael's eyes, which were filled with such fierce love and protection that it almost blocked out the pain. We said our vows. I promised to love him. He promised to be my partner in all things. When he kissed me, the applause was loud, but my ears were straining for the voices that weren't there. The reception was beautiful. The food was exquisite, but the ghost of my family haunted every toast. Michael's father, a retired judge, gave a speech. "To Anna," he raised his glass. "We are so incredibly lucky to welcome you. You are brilliant, resilient, and kind. Our family is finally complete." I smiled and drank the champagne, but inside I was screaming. Why am I not enough for them? What did I do wrong? Was the money not enough? Was I not perfect enough? Later that night, back in our hotel suite, the adrenaline faded and the grief crashed over me. I sat on the edge of the bed, still in my wedding dress, and checked my phone one last time. No missed calls, no texts. But there was a notification from Instagram. Jessica had posted a story. I clicked it, my hands trembling. It was a video of them, Mom, Dad, and Jessica. They were at a spa. "Girls' weekend with Mommy," Jessica squealed at the camera, clinking a mimosa glass with Mom. Dad was in the background, reading a newspaper. The timestamp was from 4 hours ago, right when I was walking down the aisle. They weren't dead. They weren't in the hospital. They were at a luxury spa 2 states away, spending money, likely money I had given them previously, on the very day of my wedding. Michael came out of the bathroom, saw my face, and took the phone from my hand. He watched the video once, his jaw tightening until a muscle leaped in his cheek. "Don't look at it," he said, tossing the phone onto the armchair. He knelt in front of me and took my hands. "Anna, listen to me. This isn't about you. This is about their brokenness. They are trying to hurt you because they can't control you anymore." I sent the invites, I whispered, the tears finally spilling over hot and fast. "I know I did. Mom signed for them. Why would they do this?" "I don't know," Michael said, "but we are going to find out. And Anna?" "Yeah? You are never giving them another cent, not a penny. Promise me." I looked at my new husband. I looked at the empty chairs in my memory. I looked at the girls' weekend caption burned into my mind. "I promise," I said. And for the first time, I truly meant it. The sadness was beginning to curdle into something else, something darker, something useful. 6 months passed. The silence from my family continued, heavy and absolute. I didn't reach out. I respected my promise to Michael, and honestly, I was too hurt to try. Life with Michael was wonderful. We merged our finances, and for the first time, I saw what healthy money management looked like. We were building wealth, not patching holes. But the mystery of the wedding invitations gnawed at me. It was a loose thread in the fabric of my reality. Then came the clue. It was early November. I was at my desk reviewing quarterly projections when my phone rang. It was Aunt Sarah. I hadn't spoken to her since before the wedding. She was the black sheep of the family, mostly because she refused to tolerate my mother's narcissism. "Anna," she said, her voice clipped, "I just wanted to call and say, I'm hurt." I blinked. "Aunt Sarah? What do you mean?" "I heard you got married," she said. "I saw the photos on Michael's Facebook page. He looks like a lovely man. But, Anna, why didn't you invite me? I know I'm not rich like your mother's friends, but I thought we were close." My blood ran cold. "Sarah, I did invite you. I sent a huge packet to Mom and Dad's house. I included invitations for everyone. You, Uncle Ben, Grandma. I asked Mom to distribute them because I didn't have your new address in Florida." There was a long silence on the other end. "Anna," Sarah said slowly, "Linda never gave me an invitation. In fact, when I asked her about you a few months ago, she told me you were going through a phase and had cut everyone off. She said you were single and miserable in Seattle." The room spun. "Single and miserable?" She said what? "She said you were having a mental breakdown and refused to talk to the family. That's why none of us reached out. We thought you wanted space." The puzzle pieces slammed together with the force of a car crash. They hadn't just ignored the wedding, they had actively erased it. They had intercepted the invitations intended for the extended family and spun a lie to isolate me. "Sarah," I said, my voice shaking, "I need you to listen to me. I sent that package via priority mail. Mom signed for it." "I believe you," Sarah said, her tone shifting from hurt to anger. "That woman, she's always been jealous of you, Anna. But this is sick." "Why?" I asked, the word escaping me like a gasp. "Why would she do that?" "Because," Sarah sighed, "if you're married, you have a husband. If you have a husband, you have a new priority. You have protection. Linda needs you to be the lonely, desperate spinster who needs her approval and who pays her bills. A married Anna is an independent Anna." I hung up the phone and sat in silence for a long time. I pulled up the USPS website on my computer. I still had the tracking number saved. I entered it again. Status delivered. Signed for by L. Miller. I clicked to view the proof of delivery. There it was. My mother's loopy, arrogant signature. I printed the page. Then I started digging. I went into my old email accounts, the ones my family knew. I checked the trash folder. Nothing. Then I checked the blocked addresses. My stomach dropped. Every email address associated with Michael, his parents, and our wedding planner had been blocked. I checked the login history. Someone had accessed my old email account, the one I set up in college and never changed the password for, from an IP address in Connecticut, 3 days after I mailed the invites. They had logged in, seen the digital save the dates I sent as backups, and blocked everyone. They had scrubbed my digital life clean to ensure no news reached them or the extended family. It was a conspiracy. It wasn't just Mom. Jessica had to be involved. She was the only one who knew my old passwords from when we shared a laptop years ago. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, but I wiped it away angrily. This wasn't sadness anymore. This was war. I picked up the phone and called Michael. "Hey," he answered, sounding cheerful. "Ready for lunch?" "No," I said. "I need you to put me in touch with that private investigator your firm uses, the scary one." Michael paused. "Anna, what's wrong?" "They blocked the invites, Michael. They lied to the whole family. They told everyone I was having a mental breakdown." "I'm coming home," he said instantly. "No," I said. "Stay at work. I have a lot of printing to do." "And Michael?" "Yes?" "I'm going to Thanksgiving." The decision to go to Thanksgiving wasn't an olive branch. It was a subpoena. But before I could serve it, I needed more than just the tracking number. I needed leverage, absolute crushing leverage. I spent the next week operating in CFO mode. I detached my emotions and looked at my family as a failing corporation. I started with public records. I searched for my parents' home address in the county clerk's database. I expected to see the mortgage I knew about, the one they took out 10 years ago. What I found made me gasp. There were 3 liens on the house: primary mortgage, second mortgage, and a home equity line of credit, HELOC, that was maxed out. The total debt was staggering. The house was underwater. But that wasn't the kicker. The kicker was a notice of default filed 3 weeks ago. They were in pre-foreclosure. My parents, who were currently planning a $100,000 wedding for Jessica, hadn't paid their mortgage in 4 months. How are they doing this? I muttered to myself, staring at the screen. Where is the money coming from? I kept digging. I looked into Kevin, Jessica's fiancé. A quick background check, thanks to Michael's PI contact, revealed that Kevin wasn't the Wall Street hotshot he claimed to be. He was a junior analyst with a mountain of student loan debt and a leased BMW. He was marrying Jessica because he thought we were rich. He thought I would bankroll their life. It was a house of cards built on a foundation of lies, and I was the structural support they were counting on to keep it standing. Then the realization hit me. The notice of default meant the bank was preparing to auction the debt or the house. I sat back in my chair, a cold idea forming in my mind. It was ruthless. It was something the old Anna would never have done. But the old Anna didn't have a husband who loved her. The old Anna didn't have self-respect. I called Mr. Sterling, a senior partner at Michael's firm who specialized in distressed assets and real estate law. "Anna," he said, his voice gravelly, "what can I do for you?" "Mr. Sterling, if a residential property is in pre-foreclosure, is it possible for a third party to purchase the note from the bank, to become the lien holder?" "It's possible," he said. "Banks often sell non-performing notes to get them off their books, especially if they can get a lump sum." "Why?" "I want to buy a mortgage," I said. "My parents' mortgage." There was a pause. "Anna, you become the bank. You realize that gives you the right to foreclose if they don't pay?" "I know," I said. "That's the point." It took 2 weeks of frantic maneuvering. I used a shell company, Valkyrie Holdings LLC, so my name wouldn't appear on the initial paperwork. The bank was all too happy to unload the toxic debt. I wrote a check that wiped out a significant chunk of my liquid savings, but Michael insisted. "Do it," he said. "Consider it the price of your freedom." By the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, it was done. I, Anna, legally owned the debt on 42 Oak Creek Lane. I owned the roof over their heads. I owned the dining room where they would mock me. I also printed out everything else: the tracking receipts, the email login logs, the background check on Kevin, the text messages I had recovered from an old cloud backup where Jessica complained to Mom about me. I put it all in a sleek black leather portfolio. "Are you sure you want to go alone?" Michael asked me the night before I flew out. He was packing my bag, his eyes full of worry. "I have to," I said. "If you come, they'll be on their best behavior. They'll play the victim. I need them to be themselves. I need them to show their true colors so I can feel zero guilt about what I'm going to do." "Okay," he kissed my forehead, "but I'll be by the phone. And Anna?" "Yeah?" "Give them hell." I flew into JFK on Wednesday night. I rented a car, a modest sedan, nothing flashy. I checked into a hotel near my hometown. I didn't tell them I was coming. On Thanksgiving morning, I dressed like I was going to a board meeting. A sharp navy blazer, tailored trousers, my diamond studs. No soft sweaters, no cozy daughter vibes. I drove to the house. The driveway was full of cars. Kevin's leased BMW was front and center. I took a deep breath, grabbed my black portfolio, and walked to the front door. I didn't knock. I used my key. The key they hadn't bothered to ask for back because they assumed I'd always be their obedient servant. The noise inside was deafening. Laughter, clinking glasses, the TV blaring the parade. I stepped into the foyer. Mom was the first to see me. She was coming out of the kitchen with a tray of appetizers. She froze. The tray wobbled. "Anna?" she gasped. The room went quiet. Dad stood up from the recliner. Jessica popped her head out of the dining room. "Surprise," I said flatly. We didn't know you were coming," Mom stammered, recovering quickly. She pasted on a fake smile. "We didn't set a place for you." "That's fine," I said, walking past her into the dining room. "I'm not here to eat." "Well, don't just stand there," Jessica said, looking me up and down with disdain. "Since you're here, you can help serve. The caterers are running late." I looked at my sister. She looked so confident, so secure in her delusion. "No," I said. "I think I'll sit." I pulled out a chair at the head of the table, Dad's usual spot, and sat down. I placed the black portfolio on the table with a heavy thud. "Anna, what has gotten into you?" Dad blustered, his face turning red. "That's my seat." "Not anymore," I said. "Actually, Robert, we need to talk about seating arrangements and payment plans." The air in the room shifted. They sensed it. The prey had returned as the predator. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on, but my family, in their infinite arrogance, decided to ignore it. They defaulted to their standard operating procedure, denial and demand. Dad huffed and took a seat at the side of the table. Mom fluttered around, instructing the extended family to sit down, trying to smooth over my rude entrance. "Well," Mom said, pouring wine with a shaky hand, "it's nice of you to join us, Anna, even if it was unannounced. We were just celebrating Jessica and Kevin." I watched them. Kevin was staring at my blazer, likely assessing the cost. Jessica was glaring at me, annoyed that I had interrupted her spotlight. "So, Anna," Kevin said, leaning back in his chair, arm draped around Jessica, "we heard you're doing well in Seattle." "Still crunching those numbers?" "Something like that," I said, sipping the water I had poured for myself. "That's great," Kevin smiled, a shark showing its teeth. "Because Jess and I were looking at the budget for the wedding venue. The plaza is expensive, you know, and we were thinking, since you're the big sister, it would be a beautiful gesture if you sponsored the reception, kind of a wedding gift." I almost laughed. The audacity was breathtaking. "Sponsored?" I asked. "Like a corporate event?" "Like family?" Mom interjected firmly. "Anna, you have so much disposable income. You're single, you live in a small apartment. What are you saving for? Your sister has found true love. Don't you want to support that?" "Disposable income?" I repeated. "Is that what you think I have?" "Well, you certainly aren't spending it on your wardrobe," Jessica sneered under her breath, though loud enough for everyone to hear. "Come on, Anna. Mom and Dad are putting up the house to help us. The least you can do is match their contribution. 50,000. That's all we need from you today." Putting up the house. My ears perked up. They weren't just selling the house. They were refinancing. Or trying to. "You're leveraging the house?" I asked, looking at Dad. "I thought the mortgage was almost paid off." Dad coughed, avoiding my eyes. "Well, you know, the market is tricky. We have some equity we want to utilize." "Utilize?" I said. "You mean spend." "It's an investment," Mom snapped. "Jessica's wedding will put us on the map." "The connections we'll make? Kevin's boss is coming. This is about the future." "Whose future?" I asked. "Kevin's? Jessica's? What about your retirement, Dad? You're 65. Do you have any savings left?" "That's none of your business," Dad shouted, slamming his hand on the table. The silverware rattled. "You come into my house, eat my food?" I haven't eaten a bite, I pointed out calmly. And you lecture me about finances? I am the head of this household. Are you? I asked softly, because from where I sit, it looks like you're drowning. Stop it, Anna, Jessica screamed. She stood up, her face red. You're just jealous. You're jealous because I'm getting married and you're going to die alone with your cats. You're bitter and you're trying to ruin my day. Sit down, Jessica, I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it had a steel edge to it that made her pause. Don't tell me what to do. I said, sit down, I repeated, because we need to discuss the reality of this investment. I tapped the black leather portfolio on the table. You want $50,000 from me? I asked. It's the least you can do after ignoring us for 6 months, Mom said, crossing her arms. We haven't heard a peep from you. No calls, no visits. You abandoned this family, Anna, and now you show up here and act superior? If you want to be part of this family, you need to pay your dues. Pay my dues, I nodded. Like I paid for the roof, like I paid for the car, like I paid for the heart surgery that turned into a driveway. Mom paled slightly. That was necessary. And the wedding invitations? I asked. The room went dead silent. Mom's eyes darted to the left. Attell. What invitations? She asked, her voice pitching up an octave. We never got any invitations. I told you, Anna. We thought you were having a breakdown. Right, I said. The breakdown? The one where I block my entire family and hide in Seattle? Exactly, Mom said, gaining confidence. We were worried sick, but we respected your privacy. And now, if you want to make it up to us, well, the checkbook is in your purse. They were doubling down. Even now, faced with direct questions, they were lying. They truly believed I was stupid. They believed I was the same desperate girl who would buy their love at any cost. I looked at Aunt Sarah. She was watching me with wide eyes, holding her breath. I looked at Kevin, who was checking his watch, clearly bored by the family drama, and just waiting for the check. I looked at my parents, the people who raised me, the people who were supposed to protect me. I'm not writing a check, I said. Then leave, Jessica spat. Get out. If you aren't helping, you're hurting. Go back to Seattle and be miserable. I can't leave, I said, unzipping the portfolio, because I have some business to conduct with the homeowners. I am the homeowner, Dad bellowed. Actually, I slid a document out of the folder. It was the transfer of lien. Not anymore. The moment hung in the air, suspended by a thread of disbelief. Dad stared at the document I had slid across the mahogany table, but he didn't pick it up. He couldn't. It was as if acknowledging the paper would make it real. What is this? Mom asked, her voice sharp, annoyed. More paperwork? Anna, stop playing games. It's not a game, Mom, I said, my hand resting on the stack of papers. But before we get to the house, let's go back to the wedding. Jessica's wedding. We are not talking about you right now, Jessica groaned. God, you are so obsessed with yourself. Mom smirked, that specific, condescending tilt of the lips that had defined my childhood. Jessica is right, Anna. Look, I know it's hard. Sister's wedding was great. Well, it will be great. It's going to cost $100,000. It's going to be in vogue. And you... She gestured vaguely at my empty ring finger. I had taken my rings off before entering the house, putting them in my pocket. A strategic move. When's yours? Mom asked, leaning in. The cruelty was naked now. Really, Anna, when are you going to stop pretending you don't need us? You're 34. The clock is ticking. At this rate, we'll be using your wedding fund for Jessica's baby shower. Laughter. Dad chuckled, Kevin smirked, Jessica giggled. Even some of the cousins cracked a smile. It was the specific phrase, using your wedding fund for Jessica. The assumption that my resources were naturally theirs, that my happiness was just fuel for Jessica's fire. That was the snap. I reached into my pocket. My fingers brushed the cool metal of my wedding band and the heavy diamond engagement ring Michael had given me. Actually, I said, my voice cutting through the laughter like a razor wire, I have an answer to that. I pulled my hand out. I slipped the rings onto my finger. The diamond caught the light from the chandelier, casting a prism of rainbows across the tablecloth. It was massive, undeniable, tasteful, but clearly worth more than Kevin's entire year of salary. The laughter died instantly. I had mine, I said, 6 months ago. Mom stared at my hand. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. I replied to your question, Mom, I continued, locking eyes with her. I'm married. I have been for half a year. You, what? Dad whispered. I'm married to Michael Sterling, I said, a partner at Sterling, Vance & Pierce. We had a beautiful wedding at a vineyard. It was perfect. Liar, Mom breathed. She stood up, her face turning a blotchy red. You're lying. You just bought that ring to make us jealous. You're pathetic, Anna. Am I? I reached into the portfolio again. I pulled out the first sheet, the tracking receipt. You got the invitations, I said, sliding the paper toward her. Delivery confirmation, May 12th, signed by L. Miller. Mom looked at the paper. She recoiled as if it were a snake. I don't recall, she stammered. Don't lie. I slammed my hand on the table. It was the first time I had ever raised my voice at them. They flinched. You signed for them. You opened them. You saw that I was happy, and you decided to destroy it. You blocked my emails. You told Aunt Sarah I was having a mental breakdown. We didn't get them, Dad yelled, trying to regain control. This is faked. You printed this off the internet. Really? I pulled out the next sheet, the screenshot of the email login from their IP address. Did I fake the IP logs from your computer accessing my account? Did I fake the block list? It doesn't matter, Jessica shrieked. So what? So what if we didn't go? Nobody cares about your stupid wedding, Anna. It's my turn. Why do you always have to make everything about you? Because you wanted my money, I shot back. You ignored my marriage because you knew a husband would stop the cash flow. You wanted me single so I would pay for this. I gestured at Jessica. We are family, Mom screamed. We do what is necessary. And right now, what is necessary is that you apologize for this outburst and write the check for your sister. Impossible, I said. What? Dad glared. I said impossible. I can't write a check for the wedding. Why, are you broke? Kevin sneered. No, I smiled coldly, because I just spent all my liquid cash buying something else. I picked up the transfer of lien document, the one Dad had ignored. Dad, I said, you haven't paid your mortgage in 4 months. You're in default. That's a temporary cash flow issue, Dad sputtered. I'm handling it. The bank was going to foreclose next week, I said. They were going to put a sign in the yard and auction this house off on the courthouse steps. The color drained from Jessica's face. What? Daddy, is that true? Shut up, Jessica, Dad snapped. Then to me, I was negotiating with them. Well, negotiations are over, I said, because the bank sold the debt. They sold the note. To who? Mom whispered. Who owns our house? I leaned forward. I placed both hands on the table. I let the silence stretch until it was screaming. I do, I said. Valkyrie Holdings, LLC. That's me. I bought your mortgage this morning. I own your debt. I own this house. Dead silence. Then Dad laughed, a nervous, disbelief-filled laugh. Impossible! You don't have that kind of money. I do, I said, and here are the bank receipts. I slid the final piece of paper across the table. the wire transfer confirmation, the certified copy of the deed transfer, my name, Anna Sterling, listed as the lien holder. Now, I said, leaning back and crossing my arms, I know who hid my invites. I know who spent my money. And now I know who is going to be homeless if they don't get out of my sight in the next 30 days. The silence that followed my declaration of ownership wasn't just quiet. It was a vacuum. It sucked the air right out of the room. Dad was staring at the deed transfer document, his face a mask of gray ash. Mom was gripping the edge of the table so hard her knuckles were white, her perfectly manicured nails looking like claws. You bought the mortgage? Dad finally choked out. That's illegal. You can't just buy someone's debt. It's perfectly legal, Robert, I said, my voice steady, professional. It was the voice I used when explaining to a CEO why their company was insolvent. Distressed assets are sold every day. The bank wanted their money. I gave it to them. You haven't paid the mortgage in 4 months. You haven't paid the property taxes in 2. Technically, I could have let the foreclosure happen and bought it at auction, but I wanted to save you the public embarrassment of a sheriff's sale. Save us embarrassment? Jessica screeched. She stood up, knocking her chair over. You just ruined my engagement dinner. You're lying. This is all some sick joke because you're jealous that Kevin loves me. Jealous? I looked at her, really looked at her. I saw the fear behind the rage. Jessica, I'm not jealous. I'm prepared. Mom, make her stop. Jessica turned to Linda, stomping her foot like a toddler. Mom stood up, her eyes narrowing. She decided to play her favorite card, denial. She reached out and grabbed the stack of papers, the deed, the tracking receipts, the IP logs. This is garbage, she hissed. It's all fake, just like your imaginary husband. Before I could stop her, she ripped the papers in half. Then she ripped them again, throwing the confetti of legal documents onto the turkey platter. There, she smiled, a terrifying, unstable smile. Problem solved. Now get out of my house. I didn't flinch. I didn't scream. I just watched the paper settle into the gravy. Mom, I said softly. You know those were copies, right? The originals are in a safe deposit box in Seattle, and the digital copies are with my attorney. I don't care, she screamed. Get out. I'm not done, I said. You claimed you never got the invitations. You claimed you didn't know I was getting married. You tore up the tracking receipt, but you can't tear up the cloud. I reached into my bag and pulled out an HDMI cable. Without asking for permission, I walked over to the massive 85-inch flat-screen TV mounted above the fireplace, another luxury item they couldn't afford. I plugged it into my laptop. What are you doing? Kevin asked, looking nervous. He was the only one smart enough to realize that the ship was sinking. Just a little home movie, I said. I opened a video file. You guys never changed the password to the Ring security system, I explained as the screen flickered to life. And you never realized that the indoor camera in the mudroom records audio. On the screen, time-stamped May 12th, the image was crystal clear. It showed the mudroom of this very house. The front door opened, and Mom walked in, holding a large, thick envelope, my priority mail package. The room went dead silent. Everyone watched the screen. On the video, Mom walked to the kitchen counter, visible from the mudroom angle. Jessica walked into the frame, holding a diet soda. What's that? Video Jessica asked. Package from Anna, Video Mom said, flipping it over. It's heavy, probably a guilt gift. Open it, Jessica said. Mom tore open the envelope. She pulled out the gold leaf invitations. She pulled out the personal note. Oh my God, Video Jessica laughed, snatching an invite. She's getting married? To who? Some loser from work? Michael Sterling. Mom read the name, her face twisting. It says he's a lawyer. It says, oh, look at this. She's offering to pay for flights and hotels? We can't go, Jessica said immediately. That's the weekend of my heavy fittings for the dress. Plus, if we go, everyone will talk about her. It's my year, Mom. You promised. I know, baby, I know, Mom sighed on the screen. She looked at the invitation, then at Jessica. If she gets married, she's going to stop sending money. Husbands ask questions about finances. I heard a gasp from Aunt Sarah in the real room. On the screen, Mom made a decision. She walked over to the shredder that sat on the desk in the corner of the kitchen. What are you doing? Video Jessica asked, giggling. Protecting the family, Mom said. We all watched in high definition as my mother fed my wedding invitations into the shredder. The sound of the paper tearing was amplified by the speakers. What about the rest of the family? Jessica asked. Did she send invites for Aunt Sarah? They're all in here, Mom said, patting the packet. I'll handle it. I'll just tell everyone Anna is having a hard time. A breakdown. They'll believe it. She's always been difficult. The video ended with Mom and Jessica high-fiving. The screen went black. I unplugged the cable. The silence in the dining room was heavy, suffocating. I looked at Aunt Sarah. She was crying, her hand covering her mouth, looking at her sister with pure horror. You shredded them, Aunt Sarah whispered. You told me she was in a mental hospital, and you shredded her wedding invitations? Mom was trembling. She looked around the room, looking for an ally, but even the cousins were looking at the floor. It was a joke, Mom tried, her voice cracking. We were just blowing off steam. We didn't mean it. You blocked my email, I said. You blocked my phone number on Grandma's phone. You erased me. We were protecting you, Mom shouted, desperate now. We knew this marriage wouldn't last. We knew he would leave you, and you'd need to come back home. We were keeping your place here safe. My place? I laughed, a harsh, dry sound. My place as the wallet? My place as the servant? I looked at Jessica. She was pale, her eyes darting between me and Kevin. She knew what was coming next. She knew that the video had just exposed not only their cruelty, but their motive, money. You're a monster, Jessica whispered, recording us in our own home? My home, I corrected her. I own the mortgage, remember? And since I'm the landlord, I have a right to secure the property. I took a deep breath. The validation was rushing through my veins like adrenaline. For years, I had questioned my own reality. Maybe I am difficult. Maybe I am unlovable. But the video proved it. I wasn't the problem. I was the prey. With the emotional betrayal laid bare on the 85-inch screen, the atmosphere in the room shifted from shock to a scramble for survival. The emotional leverage was gone. They couldn't guilt me anymore. So, naturally, they pivoted to the only thing that truly mattered to them, the money. Kevin, who had been relatively quiet, cleared his throat. He stood up, adjusting his suit jacket. He was a handsome guy in a generic way, the kind of guy who practiced his smile in the mirror. But right now, his smile was gone. Okay, Kevin said, looking at me with a new, calculating expression. So there's some family drama. Fine. That's unfortunate. But let's talk business. You own the debt on the house? I do, I said. And the equity? He asked. There must be equity left. This is a prime neighborhood. I turned my iPad toward him. Actually, Kevin, let's look at the numbers. You're an analyst, right? You like data. I pulled up the spreadsheet I had prepared. The house was appraised at $850,000, I explained, pointing to the cells. The primary mortgage is $500,000. The second mortgage is $200,000, And the HELOC my parents maxed out to pay for Jessica's private college and their vacations is another $150,000, plus 4 months of unpaid interest and penalties. Kevin's eyes scanned the numbers. I saw the math happening in his head. $500K plus $200K plus $150K equals $850K. There's no equity, Kevin whispered. It's a wash. Actually, it's underwater, I corrected him. If I foreclose and sell it quickly, after fees, there is zero profit. This house is a liability, not an asset. And since my parents are the borrowers, their credit score is currently sitting somewhere in the mid-400s. I watched the realization hit Kevin like a physical blow. He looked at Jessica, who was wiping her eyes, trying to look sympathetic. Jessica, Kevin said, his voice cold, you told me your parents were funding the wedding. You said there was a trust fund. There is, Jessica cried, grabbing his arm. Mom said Anna manages the trust fund. Kevin turned to me. Is there a trust fund? I laughed. I couldn't help it. A trust fund? Kevin, I've been paying their electric bills since 2018. The only trust in this family is the misplaced trust I had that they would eventually love me. Kevin pulled his arm away from Jessica. And you, I said, looking directly at Kevin, let's talk about your contribution. I did a little digging too. It's amazing what you can find in public records. Excuse me? Kevin bristled. My finances are private. Not when you're marrying into a family I'm financially supporting, I said. You have $120,000 in student loans. Your BMW is a lease you're 2 months behind on. You have 3 maxed out credit cards. You aren't marrying Jessica for love, Kevin. You're marrying her because you thought we were the bailout package. The room gasped. Jessica looked at Kevin, horror dawning on her face. Kevin, she whimpered, is that true? Kevin straightened his tie, his face hardening. The mask dropped completely. He didn't look at Jessica. He looked at me. So, you're saying there's no money? Kevin asked me directly. The parents are broke, the house is yours, and you aren't writing a check? Not a dime, I confirmed. Valkyrie Holdings is a strict business. We don't subsidize bad investments. Kevin nodded. He turned to Jessica. I think we need to postpone the wedding, he said. Postpone? Jessica shrieked. The invitations are going out next week. I already bought the dress. You can't afford the dress, Jess, Kevin snapped, his voice echoing in the dining room. Look around. Your parents are broke. Your sister hates you. You have nothing to bring to the table. I have me, Jessica cried. I thought you loved me. I can't live on love, Kevin sneered. I have debt. I needed a partner who could help carry the load, not another anchor. He grabbed his keys off the table. I'm leaving, Kevin announced. Don't call me until you sort this mess out. And by sort it out, I mean find some money. Kevin, no, don't go. Jessica ran after him, grabbing his jacket. He shook her off roughly. Get off me, he muttered. He looked at my parents with pure disgust. You people are frauds, wasting my time. He walked out the front door, slamming it so hard the windows rattled. We heard the BMW engine roar to life and tires squeal on the pavement. Jessica collapsed onto the rug in the foyer, sobbing hysterically. It was a sound of pure, unspoiled entitlement shattering against the wall of reality. I sat at the table, watching. I felt a strange sense of calm. It wasn't happiness. It's never happy to watch a heartbreak, even a black one, but it was satisfaction. The truth had acted like a cleansing fire. Mom and Dad stood there, paralyzed. Their golden child was broken on the floor. Their rich son-in-law had just fled the scene, and their scapegoat was sitting at the head of the table, holding the deed to their existence. You did this, Dad whispered, turning to me. His face was red, veins bulging in his neck. You drove him away. You ruined her life. I told the truth, I said. Kevin was a gold digger, Dad. You should thank me. I just saved Jessica from a nasty divorce 5 years down the road. You are evil, Mom spat. She rushed to Jessica, cradling her. Shh, baby, shh. It's okay. We'll fix it. We'll find someone better. Someone who deserves you. Then Mom looked up at me, her eyes filled with venom. Get out, she said, low and dangerous. I don't care about your papers. I don't care about your mortgage. This is my house. I have lived here for 30 years. You cannot kick us out. We are your parents. Actually, I said, standing up and smoothing my blazer, that's the next item on the agenda. I reached into the portfolio for the final document, the one I had hoped I wouldn't have to use, but knew I would. This, I said, placing a single sheet of paper on the table, is a notice to quit. It's a legal eviction notice. The word eviction hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Dad stared at the paper. He didn't touch it. He looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I didn't see the imposing, terrifying father figure. I saw a tired, defeated old man who had gambled everything on image and lost. You can't do this, Dad said, his voice shaking. We have rights, squatters' rights, tenants' rights. You aren't squatters, I explained calmly. You are former owners who have defaulted, and under the terms of the mortgage transfer, which I now hold, you have become tenants at will. I am terminating that tenancy. You're kicking your parents out on the street? Aunt Sarah asked, her voice trembling. But she wasn't looking at me with judgment. She was looking at me with awe. No, I said, I'm not a monster. I'm giving them 30 days. That's more than the law requires in a foreclosure situation. You have 30 days to vacate the premises. Where will we go? Mom wailed from the floor, still holding a sobbing Jessica. We have no money. You know we have no money. I know, I said. Maybe you can sell the espresso machine, or the vintage Mustang, or the designer handbags Jessica has been collecting. I estimate there's about $20,000 in liquid assets sitting in your closets and garage. That should be enough for a security deposit on a 2-bedroom apartment. Apartment? Jessica lifted her head, mascara running down her face. I can't live in an apartment. What about my studio? What about my space? Welcome to the real world, Jessica, I said, cold as ice. It's crowded, it's expensive, and nobody cares about your vibes. Dad walked over to me. He tried to summon his old authority. He puffed out his chest. Anna, he said sternly, enough is enough. Tear that paper up. Apologize to your sister. Write us a check to cover the arrears, and we will forget this ever happened. We will forgive you. I looked at him. I remembered the little girl who waited for him to come home, who got straight A's just to make him smile, who drained her savings to save his wife. You'll forgive me? I asked, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. Dad, look around. You have no leverage. You have no power. I don't want your forgiveness. I don't want your approval. And I certainly don't want to be part of this family anymore. We are your blood, he shouted. Blood is just biology, I said. Family is behavior, and your behavior has been parasitic. I walked over to Aunt Sarah. I took her hand. Sarah, I said gently, if you want, you can come stay with me and Michael in Seattle for a while. We have a guest room, a real one. You don't have to stay here and watch this ship go down. Sarah looked at her sister, then at me. She squeezed my hand. I think I'll go to Florida to see my grandkids. But thank you, Anna. I'm proud of you. Hearing those words, I'm proud of you, from someone in this room broke something inside me. But it was a good break, like a fever breaking. I turned back to my parents. 30 days, I repeated. On day 31, the locks will be changed. If you are still here, the sheriff will remove you. My property manager will be in touch regarding the inspection. Property manager, Mom spat. You aren't even going to handle it yourself? No, I said. I have a life to get back to, a husband who loves me, a job that respects me. I don't have time for this anymore. I picked up my black portfolio. I didn't look at the turkey. I didn't look at the shattered remains of my wedding invites. Wait! Mom scrambled up from the floor. She ran to me, grabbing my arm. The anger was gone, replaced by a desperate, cloying panic. Anna, please, baby, we can work this out. We can go to therapy. We'll treat you better, I promise. Just don't take the house. It's all we have. It's our image. That's the problem, Mom, I said, gently but firmly removing her hand from my sleeve. It's just an image. It was never a home. But what will people say? She whispered, her eyes wide with the horror of social embarrassment. The neighbors, the club. Tell them the truth, I said. Tell them you raised a daughter who became so successful she bought your house. Just leave out the part where you forced her to evict you. I turned to Jessica, who was still weeping on the floor. Jessica, I said, this is the best thing that ever happened to you. You're going to have to get a job. You're going to have to learn to survive. It's going to be hard, but it's the only way you'll ever become a real person. She didn't answer. She just curled into a ball. I looked at Dad one last time. He had slumped into a chair, head in his hands. Goodbye, I said. I walked to the front door. The air in the foyer felt lighter. The oppressive weight of this house, the years of feeling small and unworthy within these walls, was lifting. I opened the heavy oak door and stepped out into the crisp November air. The sun was shining. It was a beautiful day. Walking down the driveway to my rental car felt like walking out of a prison I had built for myself. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was Michael. How did it go? He texted. I typed back, it's done. I'm coming home. I drove to the airport in a daze. My hands were shaking on the steering wheel, not from fear, but from the adrenaline crash. It was over. The secret was out. The ties were cut. When I landed in Seattle, Michael was waiting at the baggage claim. He didn't say a word. He just pulled me into his arms and held me. I buried my face in his chest, smelling his familiar scent of cedar and coffee, and finally I cried. Not tears of sadness, but tears of relief. Tears of mourning for the family I wished I had, and tears of gratitude for the family I had found. Let's go home, he whispered. Yes, I said, let's go home. It's been 6 months since that Thanksgiving. My parents didn't move out in 30 days. They dragged it out to 45, trying to file emergency injunctions, but my paperwork was ironclad. Eventually, the sheriff did have to come. The neighbors watched as Linda and Robert were escorted off the property, their boxes of image piled on the curb. I didn't keep the house. I sold it immediately to a young family. I didn't want the profit, and I certainly didn't want the memories. I took the proceeds from the sale, paid off the legal fees, and donated the rest to a charity that helps financial literacy for young women. My parents are currently living in a 2-bedroom apartment in a town 3 towns over, one that Mom used to make fun of. Dad had to go back to work as a consultant, but his reputation is shot, so he's not making much. Mom is selling her designer clothes on eBay. Jessica? Surprisingly, she took the hardest hit but is showing the most signs of life. Kevin never came back. He was engaged to another girl within 3 months. Another heiress, I hear. Jessica had to get a job. She's working as a receptionist at a salon. A mutual friend told me she actually apologized to a client for being late the other day. It's a start. As for me, I'm sitting here in my living room in Seattle, looking out at the rain. Michael is in the kitchen making dinner. I can hear him humming. I received an email from Mom last week. It was long, rambling, full of excuses, but it ended with, "We miss you. We love you." I didn't reply. I moved it to a folder labeled The Past. I learned a hard lesson, but a necessary one. We are taught that family is everything, that we must sacrifice ourselves on the altar of blood relations. But sacrifice is only noble if it's appreciated. Otherwise, it's just self-destruction. I realized that I spent my whole life trying to buy a seat at a table where I was the main course. I was being consumed. To anyone listening to this who feels like the ATM of their family, who feels like their achievements are invisible until they are needed to pay a bill, stop. You cannot buy love. You cannot earn respect from people who benefit from your disrespect. Walk away. Close the account. Shred the checkbook. It will be painful. It will be scary. They will call you selfish. They will call you crazy. But on the other side of that guilt is freedom. On the other side is a life where you are loved for who you are, not what you can provide. I looked down at my hand. The sapphire ring sparkled. I looked at the empty space on the wall where I used to keep my bitterness. It's gone now. I'm Anna. I'm a wife. I'm a CFO. And for the first time in my life, I'm free. Thank you for listening to my story. Don't forget to check out the other videos on the channel. There are more stories, more lessons, and more truth. Until next time, take care of yourselves. You are worth more than what you can give.